just going to talk about that for the next 17 minutes. So let me start with you, Alan. Your company is Link & Co., and people need to know that this is a company owned by Geely, which is the Chinese car brand that also owns Volvo, and Link & Co. with a Volvo platform is pushing into a subscription type service here in Europe. So talk about that, Alan.
Yeah, well, it's basically the whole concept is started by setting up a new car brand, and then the first question is, does the world need a new car brand? And the answer was clearly no. We see that the car industry is 100 years old, and the business model is 100 years old and hasn't really evolved at all. We engineer, design cars, make them in our factories and sell them to dealers, and dealers sell them to customers and fix them. And yet the consumer today is a totally different type of creature than it was 10 years ago, let alone 100 years ago. So you have this massive mismatch between a massive industry and a new consumer. So we basically said, let's start with the consumer instead of the car, and say, what does a consumer really want now? It's a very convenient mobility, which today is not offered. So we basically said, instead of selling cars, let's sell a mobility service and build a brand around that. So it's a completely different business model.
And you're starting in the Netherlands next year?
Yeah, we will launch, so we will not have dealers. That makes us less popular in a lot of areas, as you can imagine. But we're basically starting in Amsterdam with our first store, the physical store, which will be in cities in its own stores, very much lifestyle driven with probably one car, and then we roll out to the other European markets. But we start physically in Amsterdam, but we start online in Europe.
Timu, let's talk to you about your company, which is Finnish, based in Finland, and you advise industries how they might pivot to putting the customer first, being customer organized, and also selling a service as opposed to selling a product. So talk about that.
Yeah, so we are across Europe in 5 countries, and extensively we work with the automotive, but also with the other industries. And where we see a massive change is, of course, this power of the consumer. And especially when we talk about moving away from the products more to the services businesses, and that's a dramatic shift from the cultural perspective as well, that how the companies are building their products, and of course the digital is very much enabling the services, and the digital enables the dialogue with the consumer in a new way, providing data, but also like trying out new things, and that's what we are helping with our clients to move forward with that.
And so companies that have had the same market for decades or 100 years, they might be selling a different type of thing, selling a service for that product as opposed to selling the object.
Exactly. That's what we see a lot, and it happens both on the B2B and B2C environments as well. And that's the services is the new model, and we are trying to find the ways that how might these clients establish the new services, build them by themselves, or collaborate with the existing players in the market.
Okay. And Felix, what you're doing is on the same plane. You're working with automakers, and you're starting out in England and in the UK, and first with BMW, but also with other brands in would we call it a subscription service?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think exactly the same direction that you guys have just explained already. There's a new generation of buyers coming to the market, a new empowered consumer, and every kind of vertical of our lives has been digitalized with amazing new services, but somehow buying a car remains this weird outlier transaction that you still do at a physical retailer. Why that's the case? Because I think as you then understand and kind of work with the industry, they're very old established distribution models, but I don't think they necessarily serve what the customer wants. And we essentially started 3 years ago to really rethink that. How could a contemporary car ownership experience look like? And what we offer is digitally native, so without the need to talk to anyone, you can go to our site, use our app, get a car without the need to talk to anyone. You can get the car with maintenance, insurance, everything included, and you can have it delivered to your house within a couple days. New cars, used cars, most makes and models, all delivered through a very contemporary user experience that you're also used to from car sharing, from ride sharing, from all other aspects of your life. And we want to bring the same elegance, the same convenience to car ownership as a category.
But the automakers don't think that that undercuts their whole dealership model?
So most car makers don't own the dealerships. And with that, we can credibly show them. So just as a statistic, in the UK, the average car buyer is male and in their late 50s. That's the average. We're serving predominantly a millennial customer with an average age of someone in their mid-30s. So we can very credibly show them, through us as a new digital channel, you're reaching a next generation customer you have a very hard time reaching today that is not well addressed by the traditional car ownership model.
Well, still, I would think that the dealers probably don't like it very much. Whether they're owned by the automaker or not.
I think the incumbents are also on the same page that change is coming and change is happening basically with them or without them. And I think there are a lot of amazing companies out there that embrace that work with us in a partnership model, and that's how our business is based on. We're not trying to kind of disrupt them or outcompete them. We're helping them to transition into the future, bridge their business models into the future.
What brands are you initially going to be working with in the UK?
So we have the majority of car brands live on our site, either working directly with the manufacturers, in the case of BMW, Toyota, Volkswagen, PSA, Fiat Chrysler, Renault Nissan, many others. But we also work with big leasing companies who then buy a lot of cars and help them kind of channel
So
their
from the
business.
consumer point of view, I would just go online, fill in a few forms, and then the car arrives.
Exactly, you find typically a couple hundred cars listed on our site, very well described, real kind of vehicle listings, the exact car. You can browse around, compare prices, find the one you want, try it on a monthly subscription or commit to a long-term contract, and again, have it conveniently delivered with everything included that you need.
Alan, let's go back to Link & Co. for a second. What you're doing is unprecedented on a number of levels. One of the things is we haven't really seen Chinese car makers selling to Western audiences. It always seems like a no-brainer because the Chinese sell us everything else, from the cell phone we use and every household good. And yet cars have been the outlier. They have not penetrated the Western markets. And frankly, in many cases, because they haven't been good enough. And I think we're starting to see a whole new level of Chinese car as developed in partnership with Western companies, in this case Volvo. So are you confident that Link & Co. can establish a presence in Europe and ultimately in the US, because I think that's in your business model?
Yeah.
And of course, you did tell me you're not selling the brand of the car so much as a service. So again, it's disruptive on a lot of levels what you're doing.
Yeah,
In a good way.
and of course the answer is yes. I think the reason is that I think indeed there's still this cliche thinking that what comes from China is a cheap copy. And I think China is proving that that is no longer the case. But first, let it be clear that our car is engineered, designed in Europe, in Sweden. We're owned by a Chinese company, but the entire product development and design is done in Europe. But I think the thing is that if you would launch any car brand today, whether it comes from China, the US, Germany, or God knows where, why would you buy a new car brand? Why would you spend 20,000 euros or whatever on a brand that hasn't established itself? So we basically said that cannot be the answer, to just start building up dealerships like all the rest are doing and hope they will choose us. So we basically said the risk of doing what the others do is too big. The risk of doing something very different is actually smaller. And we said, a bit like what my colleagues are saying, let's not start by just making sure we have the best cars and then try to sell it. Let's start with doing what consumers really need. And today's car industry and OEMs, as I said before, are totally disconnected from what customers want today. And it's a super cool industry. I've spent my whole life in it and I love cars. But there's this massive disconnect between what's happening in the world and the car industry.
It's funny though, because consumers don't always know what they want until they have it. Like if you ask people, do you need a cell phone in your pocket? Or do you need a fax machine? Or do you need a copier? Before those things existed, they would have said no. But then eventually they can't live without them, right?
Yeah, and look, the facts are there. So there have been examples in the business world where a company launches a new concept and it works, even though it doesn't exist yet. In our case, I would say the need is there, and I'm not saying that we're clever and all the OEMs are stupid. I'm just saying there is room out there to do something else. People will continue to buy cars for a long time, but it's a dying species, as you heard before.
Well,
And we're
Timo,
there for
let me
the
ask you
alternative.
this. You work with a lot of different companies across different industries. Are you finding them open to new ways of dealing with a consumer, dealing with their product, selling in different ways? Do they resist that? I mean, they've got a long tradition of doing it a different way.
Well, of course, there's the one who are living in denial, but luckily enough, there's a lot of them who kind of like see that what's going on in the world and are willing to try out things. And I think this is kind of like a paradigm of like how the corporations were integrating into this innovation culture into them. I think that's been around for some time already, that let's trial, let's learn, let's pivot. And that's been the methodology for driving the change. What we see also, what is really interesting now with these services moving forward is this kind of like that there's a next shift, which is this data paradigm shift as well. So it's both innovative, entrepreneurial spirits that needs to be driven, but that's being backed up more with the data now when we talk about the services as well. So how to build this type of a culture as well, where you really you can simulate the things beforehand already, so you don't need to necessarily try out. And I think that's the big shift that we see in the companies at the moment in terms of the innovation and driving the change.
Felix, let me ask you, obviously we're heading to a future where the automobile is electric, autonomous, and connected. How do those things affect your business, particularly autonomy? Some people think that the autonomous car will not be owned. And people talk about that, but I don't see any actual movement towards making that happen. It's still on the ownership model. Are you thinking about how the autonomous car would affect your business?
Yeah, of course we're thinking about that a lot. That said, I think kind of consensus view is that that's probably going to be a bit later than we thought 5 years ago.
It is going to be later,
more
yes.
10, 20 years from now, especially kind of when we think about like mass market deployment at the right cost base. So I think what's obviously happening right now is electrification and to an extent also connectivity. And I think while we generally believe that consumers don't have a huge interest in owning cars, they want access, and we provide a kind of frictionless solution for them. I think specifically now with dozens and dozens of new EV models coming to market, for the vast majority of customers, it will be the first time they're going to get an EV. And so we think sort of the barriers when we don't really know, is it going to fit sort of my life, how does the whole charging work, does it support my lifestyle, my commute? I think having like that low entry barrier type model, we believe lends itself even better to an EV, which also, maintenance should be kind of much more of a non-issue with electric cars. That I think specifically for an EV, there's a huge opportunity for us. They're already our best performing cars. There's actually not that supply on the market already today, but that is changing, and for us that's a huge business opportunity.
It's interesting to point out at this juncture that the automakers have tried subscription models, but generally it's been agreed that they haven't done it very well. And in most cases they offered the cars at way too high subscription prices, and they've had to revise those downward quite a bit.
Yeah, so I think it's really interesting coming as an outsider into that industry that a lot of people in the industry have never bought a car because they have gotten company cars every 6 or 12 months and actually don't know about the experience. And
so they think that people are willing to pay more than they actually are?
I think they just come very much from the perspective we've got this huge range of amazing car models. Let's kind of make them accessible through these quite high-end subscription packages. I think thinking themselves they are the consumer, right? And the ultimate is if you need to hold several cars per individual user, that means it's expensive and probably still not profitable. Whereas I think if you think about things much more on a fleet level, give people choice and flexibility, but kind of have like market forces like optimize that.
We have a couple minutes left. I want to throw that same question out to Timo and Alan. How have the auto companies messed up the subscription model?
Well, I think subscription has become a buzzword. When we launched the Link & Co business model in October 16 in Berlin, I think we were the first ones to use the word subscription related to car ownership. And now I think, according to there's about 15 car companies using or utilizing subscription. And I think there's two issues. One is subscription in almost all the cases is lease, and it's just a new word for lease. It's a contract for 4 months. The key element of subscription is it's no commitment, hassle-free.
Well, the difference with just a standard lease is you can switch back and forth between different cars. That's the only real difference.
But it's most of subscriptions today are a financial lease. And the second element is that the cost is very high. Why would you subscribe a car for $1,500? Then you just rent one. And let's face it, some of the premium brands are pushing subscription. If you can afford a beautiful car like here on stage, a Porsche, you buy one. You don't subscribe one. So
if you happen to have 150,000 euros lying around.
It's just also wrong marketing and abusing of the word subscription. I think the essence of subscription should be that you just have access to a car and totally hassle-free usability of it. Where a subscription today is a lease and you commit for 24 months or 12 months. We know that consumers today, the modern consumers, they spend a lot of money on mobility, whether it's Uber or public transportation or even renting a car. They spend a lot of money, but they are not ready to spend $20,000 of buying a car, and they're also not ready to spend $500 per month for the next 24 months, because they don't know what they're going to do.
We just have like 30 seconds.
Really quickly, I would maybe build on top of that. I think that the subscription model itself, it's a really interesting value proposition, and what we of course see is that it should not be only a one offering in a silo, but I think that kind of like that it should be put the client into the center and kind of like think about the different needs, and it could be cars, but it could be connecting with the public transportation and so on. So I think that, and also I think that the OEMs should consider the car, but what else they can offer to the end users to make them stick.
That has to be your last sentence, because we're out of time. Thanks, everybody.